So this is kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can while still including all the relevant info I can still remember. I was 15 at the time. I live in the south, in a town that was built along the Natchez Trace. For anyone who doesn't know, the Natchez Trace is a very long stretch of road that runs almost the entire length of the United States north to south. It was used by tribes way back when to quickly get around the country for trade, and during the Civil War was used by both Union and Confederate soldiers for travel. It is federally protected land now and feels very isolated. No one is allowed to build anything within about a mile of the trace, and there are no streetlights, just a two-lane road. There are burial mounds, even unnamed Civil War graves, and lots of offshoot hiking trails. It is extremely illegal to dig up anything, etc. In my town, it isn't uncommon to go hiking out there because it's absolutely gorgeous. But there were stories about being careful. I remember in the 90s a young woman was killed out there while hiking. And there were all these sort of boogeyman stories about not being out on the trace after dark. Hiking the trace was something that me and some friends used to do a lot when we were young. We used to go off trail often because you can find some really cool stuff back there. One day, me and a buddy were out there going through some trails and checking stuff out like we always did. It was in the spring and not quite summer yet, but the days were starting to get longer. It wasn't super late, but later than we were usually out, just barely dusk. We were about an hour or two into hiking and had gone off trail like usual. We come up on this break in the trees that opened up in this big open field, and there's a old truck out there. That alone was a huge red flag, because you can't use any vehicles off-road there, but there were two dudes next to the truck with shovels and enough dirt next to them that you could tell they'd been digging a pretty big hole for a while. The bed of the truck was open, but we couldn't see inside it from where we were. They looked up at us, and there was like this weird second or two where no one said anything. And I don't remember who moved first, but I remember the dudes both jumping into the truck, starting it up, and driving full speed toward us. We ran back into the trees in a panic because we thought for sure they were going to run us down. I remember hearing the truck stop at the trees behind us as we ran, and hearing them get out yelling. We ran for what felt like a solid couple minutes before we jumped into a deadfall of broken trees and just stayed as quiet as we could. We could hear them a ways off and could hear dogs barking as well, like they had dogs with them. And I specifically remember hearing one of them yell at some point, "I can't see you, but I can hear you, and my dog's gonna get you." We just stayed quiet and didn't move, because we never heard them get close enough that we thought they'd spot us. Eventually, we heard the truck start again in the distance and stayed out until we couldn't hear it anymore, and then we carefully walked back to the car without saying a word. I remember the whole ride home, we were quiet and every pair of headlights we saw made me almost have a heart attack because I thought it was gone, not be them looking for us. I never found out what they were doing out there, but it must have been something bad. When I was younger, my brain always went to the obvious cliché, like someone hiding a body, mostly because it would be a good spot to do it. No one looks for stuff out there. But as I got older, I began to think that it was probably either dirty money or drug stashes. The town is also small enough that I've always wondered if I ever ran into these people again out in public and just not known it, getting groceries or running errands. How many times have I been a car or two behind them at a stoplight? To this day, it gives me the willies. Has happened around 2016 and is still what I would call the scariest moment of my life. I was in my freshman year of university and myself and a few friends decided it would be a lovely idea to travel just outside of the town to this view on a hill, which was a pretty popular spot for many students and locals. We were even more excited to hotbox our friend's car, get super stoned and watch the sunset. For some context, I live in a pretty dangerous country where you do have to be pretty aware of your surroundings at all times. Even though it is a student town, it still had its fair share of robberies, muggings, and even the occasional act of violence, stabbing, or even murder. You, however, get used to it once you are an adult, and if you have never experienced crime or true fear, you naively go around never expecting something sinister. The spot we went to did have its fair share of muggings and scares over the years for some, but we didn't even think twice. We pulled up when the sun still had about 30–45 minutes of visibility and began the smoking session. Everything was going well and we were cracking joke and very happy with just getting through an intense week. I noticed no others' cars around and was pretty happy about it, as I didn't really feel comfortable smoking and hotboxing a car in the presence of others. After gazing at the beautiful sun and talking to my best friend, I turned my head to the right to look out the passenger window, and that's when I saw them, 4 men, torn up outfits, crouched in the bushes no more than 20 feet away, staring and waiting like lions with their prey, just hoping for us to open those doors and get out the car. What was even more terrifying was how focused they all seemed on us. I immediately shouted to my friend who was driving, "There's guys in the bushes waiting for us. Drive." He accelerated and drove off without a second's hesitation, and when we were no more than 50 meters down the dirt road, I looked back and saw 2 men walking onto the road, just staring as we jetted off. Of course, we were all quite shaken up when we got back home and were just so grateful we never left the car and noticed them when we did. Best case scenario was that they were going to mug us. I still to this day try to avoid thinking about the worst case, and even recounted it to one of the friends who was there that day, and he agrees that those men had evil intentions by the looks on their face and the reputation of gangsters and desperate people in our country. So to the 4 men who were waiting for us, let's not meet again. My family owns a boutique in a very big city here in the South. Our boutique is located in a very wealthy neighborhood, but that doesn't say much. If you go not even a mile north, south, west, or east, you'll enter rough areas of the city. With that being said, we have a lot of homeless, drug addicts, and sketchy people in general come in our stores. When these people come in, we are also nice, respectful, and treat them just like we would our normal customers. We try not to judge by their appearances. However, we don't tolerate the begging, stealing, or soliciting. So we've all had our share of weird encounters at our store. However, I think my most recent encounter was the creepiest. Last week, getting ready to close, I was tidying up the store when a woman came in. I greeted her as normal and everything seemed smooth sailing. She was looking around and engaging in conversation about some of our pieces when all of a sudden things changed quickly. The vibe and feeling of the room just felt eerie, so I moved behind the counter just to create a barrier. She began by grabbing one of our candles that has the saying "I love you" to the moon and back across the front. I think this is what originally triggered her. She began talking about her family and how she would read the book "I Love You" to the moon and back to her triplets that she didn't know she even had. She then started telling me about her life being married to Ryan Gosling, and how she recently killed him because he kept poisoning her and hiding her 3 sets of triplets and daughter from her. At this point I was just listening. I didn't want to upset her any more than she already was. When she finished, she began walking the store again, telling me how she just got out of jail for stabbing someone. And at this point she gets about 4 feet from my counter and tilts her head, looks me in the eyes, and says, "I really feel like chopping you up right now." We were the only 2 in the store at the time, and I was in shock. I had no clue what was about to happen. Up until then, she was just rambling. This was the first instance of her showing aggression. Luckily, seconds after that statement, another customer, one of my regulars, came in, and the woman, who just told me she wanted to chop me up, grabbed her stuff and walked out the door. My regular could feel the tension as I rushed behind her and locked us in the store. So, lady who wants to chop me up, let's not meet ever again. I, 21F, was a freshman in college in fall of 2022. I was attending a junior college about 2 hours from my hometown. It was a good distance where I could get home pretty quickly, but still had independence. The college was in a small town surrounded by fields and farm animals. I moved into dorms where mainly students, majoring in arts, lived. The building was 3 floors, girls on the top floor and boys on the ground floor, the laundry room in the basement. For a while things seemed pretty normal. I slowly started to recognize faces. There were twin brothers who lived in the building. I had seen them around our building and around campus, but I started to hear more. I was a dance major, but my roommates were all theater and music majors. One of my roommates who was in theater told me that multiple girls in the theater department had gone to the school with a signed document where they had all told stories about being stalked and harassed by one of the twins, Adam. After this had all taken place, the next year, I actually was roommates and am now best friends with the girl who started the document. I did not know her at the time, but she lives 2 doors down from me. Adam would text and follow girls and even just show up to events he was never invited to. The school did nothing. I could go on about how the school and what they didn't do in many situations, but that would be a whole other story. Anyways, I felt lucky because Adam has not spoken to me. I felt unsafe living in a building with him, but it seemed I was not on his radar. Something important to note is that due to the small campus and many international students, most students did not have a car, including Adam and his brother. Adam and his brother were international students. I knew this because of an introduction meeting we had had with all the arrays and residents at the beginning of the year. They had moved to my campus to be students. After some time passed, winter break came. Adam was the last thing on my mind because I was about to be 2 hours away from him for a month, and once again he had never seemed to be interested in me. Me and my friend from my hometown had made plans to get dinner the night I got back from my 2 hour drive. I was excited to see her and get dinner at the restaurant we always went to, because my small college town had a McDonald's and that's about it. We ordered our food and sat down. We were catching up when I looked up and had to take a double take. Adam was sitting at a table across the room staring at me. I immediately told my friend. In the moment I did not fully comprehend what was happening. It wasn't until we left that it really started to shake me up. How had he gotten to my hometown, 2 hours away from the college, and ended up in the same restaurant at the same exact time as me? I know for a fact he had no car. His brother was not with him. My hometown was smaller compared to other cities he could have gotten to in 45 minutes to an hour, so why was he there? When I got back to campus after the break, I found out Adam and his brother had moved back home. I don't know if it was their choice or something the school did, but to this day something inside of me quivers when I think of Adam. I went to that school until May of 2024 when I graduated with my associates and never say Adam or his brother again. I don't know how he would have known where to find me, but knowing his past, the situation has never sat right with me. Anyways, Adam, let's never meet again.